Hi, this is Max from GAGE Motorsports. I'm here today to talk to you about the GAGE Motorsports F1 valve seats, how they work, how to install them, and what to expect, plus all the benefits. So first, let's start with the geometry of a cylinder head with the two valve seats installed. And let's start with talking about steel valve seats. What you have in the normal installation process is installing two steel seats, cutting your angles. Whether you do a single angle or a triple angle is irrelevant, and most people then lap those valves in to get a perfect seal, and they check with flashlights to make sure they're not getting any light through. But here's what happens once the engine fires and the cylinder head starts to heat up and you get some cold intake fuel mixture and a hot exhaust. This side here, being the intake side, introduces into the chamber a cold fuel mixture, and if you're running methanol, it's even colder. And what happens at operating temperature is this area between the two seats becomes very hot. This cold air coming in, or this cold mixture coming in from the intake, starts to cool this area. It also cools an area right around here on the exhaust seat. As that cools, it distorts, and it actually shrinks, and it actually moves slightly from our view here, slightly to the left, making this seal slightly egg-shaped. So the valve will end up hitting in this area that's distorted, and the rest of the seat begins to leak at operating temperature. The exact opposite happens to the intake. When we're talking about this hot exhaust going out, it superheats this area here and also heats the intake seat in the same opposite area as the exhaust seat. But this side of the seat expands because it's getting hotter and the rest of the seat stays cooler. So this also moves slightly to the left, giving you another egg shape. And what happens then is the valve seats around 3/4 of the way around, but this area here that got heated will leak. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we solve the problem by changing the material of the valve seats and not cutting the actual valve contact surface at all, and allowing the valve to hammer its own seat in at operating temperature. And when I say operating temperature, I'm talking about under a full load, race conditions. And what you're going to have then is both of these seats will distort. But after the distortion takes place, the seat material that we're talking about is the GAGE F1 seats, is very, very soft. And what that will allow the valves to do is hammer their own seats in at operating temperature after the distortion has taken place. Once the distortion has taken place and the valve begins to hammer its own seat, you will end up with a perfect seal. But that seal will only be perfect at operating temperature, which is where you want it to be. When the engine gets cold, the seats will distort back to their normal shape, which now is egg-shaped as far as the seat surface is concerned, and they're going to leak like crazy. So if you check to see if they're sealing by pulling the head off and taking a flashlight and looking through, you're going to see all kinds of light. But the light you're looking at is the exact same light that you now have with steel seats, but at operating temperature. Those are the leaks that you have when this cylinder head is at operating temperature with stock seats or steel seats. So now, how do we install these new F1 seats, and what does that look like? And we're going to bring you over to a different drawing here. And you can see the valve itself and a section view of the valve and a section view of the seat. And this assumes you're going to be wanting a 3-angle seat. So you've got 30 degrees here, 30 degrees here, a 45 degree on your valve itself, which is the actual seat, or the valve seat itself. So now, instead of cutting 3 angles, I would suggest cutting the 2 outside angles and leaving a sharp edge right where it comes in contact with the valve. You can move that edge up or down if you like, depending upon what your preference is and what you've decided the best theory is for yourself. I've drawn it here approximately 1/3 of the way down from the outside edge of the valve. So now you have a very minimal contact area that goes all the way around the valve. Once you start this engine up, get it up to operating temperature by revving the engine. If you're doing this on a dyno or if you're doing it on the track, however you do it, you get out there and let the engine warm up, and as soon as it warms up, hammer down. Once the hammer is down, now the valves can start seating themselves into that soft material. Once they start creating this seat and hammering this material down, the F1 seat material work hardens. So what you end up with is a super hard surface that will now come in contact with the valve. But you will have a perfect seal at operating temperature. And the reality is, so far, from all the respondents, when we ask questions about people that use this valve seat, this F1 seat, is that the longer they run, the better they seal. The only problem that's come back so far is one gentleman came back and said, well, you know, we get off the starting grid and it takes about 2 laps for the heat to get back into the head, and then she really runs good. The solution to this would probably be try to get as much heat into the head while you're sitting on the starting grid. Don't be afraid to rev that engine, get some heat into that head. And it's not just heat itself, it's getting the cold mixture in and the hot exhaust out to help those 2 seats distort again. The distortion is what you're now looking for. And if that's not enough, you might want to be the last one off the starting grid onto the track, so that you can hammer down for at least a half a lap or 3/4 of a lap trying to catch up to the pack and get into your starting position. That will help also. Help reduce the amount of time it takes for those seats to distort, get back operating temperature, and give you full power. The other downside to the seat, at least I think it's a downside at this point, is we haven't had any heads come back that need replacement. Now, you're never going to want to recut these seats as long as you don't change the valve. If you change a valve, you can try recutting the seats, but you're going to have to get through the hardened area. I'm not sure how deep that hardness goes. There may be a possibility that you're going to end up having to replace the seat when you replace a valve. But as long as you're not replacing a valve, let it run forever. As long as the valve stays good, the seat will remain perfect to that valve at operating temperature. And again, the longer it runs, the better it is. So try to get as much heat into the head as possible just prior to the race. Try to get a good lap in, trying to catch the pack before the start, before the green flag. Get more heat into that head. And once the heat's in, you're going to see a marked difference in how the engine performs. All the information that I've got back so far is they've exceeded their records as far as some of these engine builders go that build cookie cutter engines, and they put them on a dyno and they're all within a 1/16 of a horsepower of each other. Once they use the F1 seats and break them in properly and the seats are formed, the word that comes back to me is we've broken our records as far as performance goes and horsepower goes. So this is the story of our F1 seats. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to give me a call at GAGE Motorsports. The number here is area code 702-845-7181. I am in Connecticut, East Coast time, so if you're on the West Coast, be mindful of the 3-hour difference. Don't call me at 5 o'clock in the morning or at midnight. Even though it's a West Coast number, it's a Las Vegas number because I lived there for about 10 years and I kept the cell phone. But the number again is area code 702-845-7181. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.